So I recently had the misfortune of watching my grandmother develop dementia. Now, I've of course known about dementia and roughly what it entails for most of my life. But seeing it up close is a very different thing. Not only is it heartbreaking, but you notice some things you didn't know about the disease. And I noticed a few things that made my brain draw some interesting connections. And I just want to preface this by saying I'm by no means an expert in this field. In fact, I know basically nothing about it beyond my personal experience, and some cursory reading up on it. So all of this is basically just pure speculation on my part. And I'm not suggesting I'm onto some groundbreaking theory here, but I just observed some interesting things and saw some connections that may or may not actually be there. But what am I even talking about? Well, I'm talking about the similarities or parallels between dementia and dreaming. Because to me, dementia seems to be some sort of a perpetual or transient dream state. And while I did find some research suggesting links between dementia and proper sleep, and frequent nightmares potentially predicting dementia, I didn't see anything talking about the mechanics involved in both potentially being the same. And what I mean by that is perhaps the things going on in the body, in the brain, on a physical level, which cause us to dream and treat dreams differently from reality, are perhaps the same things that cause people to experience dementia. And maybe if we understood one better, we might understand the other better too. And maybe that could even lead to some better treatments for dementia, or hopefully prevent it altogether. I don't know, I'm just speculating here and throwing some ideas around. Because as I said, I made some observations, and I'm not convinced they're completely coincidental. Okay, but what are these observations I made? Well, as most of you probably know, when you wake up from a dream, you tend to almost immediately forget it. And even if you remember it at that very moment, it sort of starts to slip away very quickly. Most of the time anyway. And you may also have realized that this is not how real-world experience works. Because in the waking world, when you experience something, you tend to remember it, possibly for a very long time. Even when you think you forgot something, you probably didn't. And I haven't looked into the research on this. But I assume this is to help you distinguish waking reality from the dream world. Because imagine if you vividly remembered every single dream you had. That could very quickly become a problem. Because it could become difficult to distinguish between real experiences and memories from those you dreamt. You would have to somehow categorize them differently in your mind and try to separate the two. Just to make sure you don't start believing you actually wrestled your boss that one time. Things could quickly get slippery, and so it's probably good that the human body has developed this sort of way of dismissing these dreams in the way it has. Now, I don't know exactly what happens in the body to make you forget what you just experienced in a dream, but I hope you can already start seeing some parallels to dementia here. Because guess who has a very slippery grasp on reality, and who constantly forget things they just experienced, over and over again? That's right, people with dementia. Now, what could possibly cause you to forget an experience you just had? I don't know, but it probably happens to you every single day. Except hopefully not while you're awake. But it does that with people who have dementia. And I just want to reiterate that I don't know how these things work. I'm no expert in the field. I'm just seeing very curious connections here. But if that was the only connection I noticed between dementia and dreaming, I'd probably not think that much of it. In fact, for a while there I didn't. I thought it was kinda curious, but that was it. However, then I realized another similarity existed between the two. Because in the dream world, absurd things happen all the time. And you almost never question any of it. You just take it at face value. You're suddenly in a relationship with your third grade teacher. Cool. You can jump 16 feet in the air? No biggie. Of course you can. Or maybe you're suddenly driving a Bentley and think nothing of it. After all, it's your car, isn't it? Crazy things happen in dreams and you never question it at all. However, if you went into your bedroom in real life and your third grade teacher was waiting for you there, you might be a tad bit surprised. Most of you anyway. Or if you walked out the door into your garage in the morning and instead of a 1998 Nissan Altima, there's a Bentley waiting for you, it might give you pause. I'd say that's reasonable. So there's clearly a mechanism at play here that allows you to accept absurd things as just simple everyday fact. But only when you're dreaming. But what if that mechanism kicked in during your waking hours? Or rather, what if it never turned off? Would you be able to distinguish between real life and a dream? I'd say things would start to get slippery very fast. Now imagine if the mechanism that governs your ability to forget your dreams was also broken. Now you're walking around thinking that the dream you just had was just another real life experience. And it doesn't matter how absurd it was, you just take it at face value. Well, this is what I experienced firsthand with my grandmother. She would tell me about things that clearly didn't happen, or couldn't have happened, and sounded very much like dreams. But she recounted them like they were real experiences, and like there was nothing odd about it at all. And if I pointed out the absurdity of it to her, and that this probably didn't happen at all, and that she most likely just dreamt it, she still didn't seem to think it was that odd. She just sorta shrugged it off. Now, I don't doubt she experienced those things. I don't think she made them up out of thin air. I think she may have dreamt them, and now couldn't discern the dream from reality. And I'll give you an example of this. One day when I went to visit, there was a plate set up at the table. Fork, knife, everything. Which was a bit curious, so I asked her about it. Well, apparently it was for her husband, my granddad. She told me he'd come to visit a couple of days before, so she'd set up a plate for him in case he'd stop by again. But that he was probably just out on the town with his friends again, she said. Your husband? My granddad, I asked her, just to clarify. My granddad who's been dead for over 20 years, I asked. She seemed a little bit taken aback by that, but then just sort of brushed it off. She also kept setting that plate for him for a while after that. So either she'd seen a ghost, or she was just making things up, or she dreamt that her husband had come to visit, and now couldn't separate dream from reality. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm inclined to think that the last one is the most likely one. Now, why do I say that? Well, fast forward, maybe 2 years or so, and I myself had a dream. In this dream, my cat was in trouble. I could hear him calling out for help. I, of course, rushed over to help him, and found that he'd fallen down into some sort of old ruin of a underground structure of some sort, and I had to climb down there to go get him. And I did, and everything ended well. Cool story, bro. Well, the story doesn't end there, because then I wake up, and immediately realized how strange it had been, because my cat had been dead for over a year at that point. But while in that dream, I never once questioned it being alive. Not once. My dead cat was alive, and never did it cross my mind that this was a little bit odd, until I woke up. But what if you never actually properly wake up? What if that mechanism that makes you question absurdities never kicks in? And that mechanism that makes you instantly forget your dreams also never kicks in? And on top of that, what if the mechanism which makes you forget your dreams instead makes you forget real actual experiences? Then what? Well, then you'd be living in some sort of perpetual dream state, where you can't distinguish between what's real and what's not, and you keep forgetting experiences and conversations you just had. And someone would probably diagnose you with dementia. And I don't wish that upon anyone, because it's a terrible way to go. And unfortunately, so many people do go that way. But anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone except me, or if it's even a remotely useful thing to think about. But I have a difficult time believing that this is just coincidence. and that dementia doesn't share any mechanistic similarities with dreaming, because it sure as shit looks like it does to me. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, maybe hit that like button, or subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Or just leave a comment below telling me I'm wrong in all sorts of ways. I'm fine with that. But anyway, I think that's about it for today, and see you next time.